in the world of college football, we all have those players that we are excited to watch, where if they touch the ball, we just think that it could be a touchdown. Then you also got those players that you feel the need to sit down and watch every Saturday, because whenever they touch the ball, you just know something amazing is about to happen. That's why I want to talk about the college football career of the most entertaining college football players in the past 20 years. Tavon Austin is the guy who's starting out on this list. Why? Because he just retired, and Tavon Austin is personally my favorite non-Illinois player of all time. For anybody of a younger age that didn't watch Tavon Austin live, let me just tell you, every time he touched the ball, you just thought he could make a cut and break for 10, 20 yards. He was a yak monster. Tavon could play running back, he could play wide receiver, he was returning punts, he was returning kick returns, and he was doing it all while being electrifying. Just check out his senior highlights if you didn't get to watch Tavon Austin live. We all know the conversation between him and Reggie Bush, who has the best highlights. And personally, I'm a little biased when I say this. I think it's Tavon Austin. I actually think his junior highlights is better than his senior highlights. For his career, he had 3,400 receiving yards to go along with 29 receiving touchdowns, but on the ground, he had over 1,000 yards and he had 6 touchdowns on the ground as well. I don't know why it seemed like more when I watched him, but that's all he had. And of course, his best seasons came in his junior and senior season, where he had key games against Clemson in the Orange Bowl in his junior season. Tavon against Clemson had 123 receiving yards and 4 touchdowns, and West Virginia blew out Clemson in that Orange Bowl. Of course, his best game during his senior year came against Oklahoma. Tavon had just 82 yards receiving in that game, but on the ground, he had 21 attempts for 334 yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. And I promise you, I remember watching that game, it felt like every time Tavon touched the ball, it was just going to be a big play or a touchdown. Like, there were so many times during this game where it seemed like he was on the left sideline, and then by the end of the play, he ended up on the right sideline, but it'll also be a gain of 40 or 50 yards. Before I get off Austin's career, he was also third on special teams as he had 4 return touchdowns. By the end of his college career, he was a 2-time first-team All-American, first-team All-Big East, and first-team All-Big 12, and somewhere down the line, he probably won like Orange Bowl game MVP. And I know he just retired, so I want to say shout out to Tavon Austin for not only being one of the most entertaining players in the past 20 years of college football, but of all time in college football history.
Johnny Manziel.
Now we move on to Johnny Manzel, who's just a showstopper at Texas A&M. And I don't think anybody expected Johnny Manzel to be this good, especially going into his freshman season, where 247 had him rated as a 4-star, but compositely they had him rated as a 3-star. To add on, this was Texas A&M first year in the SEC. And on top of that, you're going to start a true freshman quarterback. Oh, some people thought this wasn't going to work. Johnny Manzel, though, made those people that didn't believe. Johnny Manzel in his freshman season did anything he wanted to do against any defense in the country. His stats his freshman year were 3,700 yards, 26 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, and that was just passing. Rushing, Manzel would have 1,400 yards and 21 touchdowns on the ground. And of course, the major game that season for Manzel came against the #1 ranked team, that being Alabama, as he had 253 passing yards to go along with 2 touchdowns. To top it off, on the ground, he had 92 yards, and they won the game, of course. By the end of the season, Manzel was named SEC Freshman of the Year, he won the Davey O'Brien Award, and he was the first true freshman Heisman Trophy winner. And let's be honest with ourselves, if it was NIL back then, Manzel would have got paid. And he probably would have been the highest paid college sports athlete, at least in football, ever. I mean, Manzel was out here on top of the college football world. I mean, he was hanging with Floyd Mayweather, hanging with Justin Bieber, going to tons of parties. Dude was just getting recognized by some of the greatest athletes in the world at that time. Now, his sophomore season was a little bit different. It was better statistically, but the team didn't have a better season compared to his first year. He had 4,100 passing yards and 37 passing touchdowns. He still had some crazy performances, like against Alabama, where he threw for a school record 464 yards and 5 touchdowns on top of that. And Manzel was so good in college that you had Skip Bayless saying that he could be a greater Cleveland athlete than LeBron. We talking about the second greatest basketball player of all time, right behind Rondo. And we all know Manzel sucked in the NFL. It is what it is, but we cannot lie. He's one of the most entertaining, electrifying college football players in the last 20 years.
The winner is Reggie Bush.
Reggie Bush is the second Heisman Trophy winner on this list, and deservedly so. I don't think anybody in college football, maybe football history, gets more nostalgia love than Reggie Bush. maybe Percy Harvin, but I think Reggie Bush is number one. And when you talk about the face of those golden USC eras during the 2000s, you think of Reggie Bush. Bush for his career will have 3,100 yards, and his Heisman season he had 1,700 yards. What separated Bush from his running mate in Lindell White was the fact that Bush was a better pass catcher, as he had 1,300 yards during his whole college career. We all remember his game against Fresno State where he had over 500 total yards and he had 2 touchdowns that game. In that same Heisman season, Reggie Bush would help lead USC to a Rose Bowl national title game against Texas. Unless you're living under a rock, then you should know Texas won this game. And I actually got a video about this game on my channel if you want to go check it out. And really one of the key moments from this game was that Reggie Bush lateral that ended up being a fumble. In the end of his career, Reggie Bush was a one-time, and depending on who you ask, maybe 2-time national champion. He was a Heisman winner. He won almost every award in 05 that a running back could win. He was a 2-time All-American, 2-time Pac-10 Offensive Player of the Year, and a 2-time first-team All-Pac-10 member. Thankfully, Reggie Bush got his Heisman back, so now the NCAA doesn't have to act like he doesn't exist anymore. The 4th player featured in this video is going to be the player that beat Reggie Bush in a Rose Bowl, that being Vince Young. Now, maybe it's because I didn't get to watch those years of Vince Young because I was too young, but it didn't seem like his first 2 years he did really much. Combining the stats, in his first 2 years, Young will have over 3,000 passing yards but 18 touchdowns to go along with 18 interceptions. Running the ball was arguably what he did best in his first 2 years, as he had over 2,000 rushing yards and 25 touchdowns in that time span. Although in 04 he did help Texas go to the Rose Bowl and get a win over Michigan. In 2005 is where things turned around for Vince Young, having over 3,000 passing yards, 26 passing touchdowns, and 12 touchdowns on the ground. Young will lead the Longhorns to an 11-0 record and a Big 12 title game, and a Rose Bowl / national championship game appearance. In that game, Young accounted for 467 total yards on offense, 3 touchdowns, and Texas won 41-38. And if that's not impressive enough, Young had the game-winning touchdown against USC, and that ended USC's 34-game win streak. On top of all that, to end his career, he was a national champion. He was a first-team All-American. He got his number retired by Texas. He was a Rose Bowl Hall of Famer. And maybe it's up for debate, though. He should have won that 05 Heisman Trophy over Reggie Bush.
Goes to the end zone. Oh, what a catch! Devonte Smith.
And I know it's controversial, but I gotta put Devonte Smith on there. I mean, he's the only non-quarterback / running back that has won the Heisman since Charles Woodson. Devonte Smith is the most dominant wide receiver I've ever watched. And to put it in perspective, I've been watching college football since Dennis Dixon's last year at Oregon. Now, I didn't get to see dominant receivers like Charles Rogers, Larry Fitzgerald, or Megatron play in college, but I believe Devonte Smith is on the same tier as those wide receivers, at least in college. Most people remember just Devonte Smith's 2020 season, but he was good before that season as well. In his true freshman season, he only had 160 yards, but he did catch that touchdown pass that won them the game in the national championship against Georgia. His next year, he had over 600 yards, but his coming out party was in 2019. In 19, Smith will lead Alabama in receiving yards, receiving touchdowns, and yards per reception. And I got an honest question, why did Jerry Jeudy and Henry Ruggs that season get more hype than Devonte Smith? And I can see why Jerry Jeudy, I mean, his route running looked really good in college, and NFL not so much. But Henry Ruggs, I mean, Devonte Smith was just playing a better receiver than Henry Ruggs. That 2020 season though, come on now, 1,800 yards, 23 receiving touchdowns. Smith could have very well had over 2,000 yards that season, as Bama would have played 14 games naturally because they made the college football playoffs, but since it was 2020, they only played 13 games. Smith will also have a rushing touchdown and a punt return touchdown as well, and Alabama needed him to have this dominant season because early in the season, Jalen Waddle, the second leading receiver for this Alabama team, got hurt. Smith and Alabama will go on to have an undefeated season and go to the national title game and beat Ohio State. Arguably, this Alabama team is the greatest team of all time, and it's definitely better than that 0-1 Miami team. Devonte Smith won the Heisman. He was a first-team All-American. He won SEC Offensive Player of the Year. I mean, I just remember in college, there was nobody that can cover Devonte Smith, especially in that 2020 season. He was cooking everybody's defense.
Jackson keeps it again, trying to stretch to the edge. What a hurdle by Jackson!
The last player I'm going to mention is Lamar Jackson, and fun fact, I actually got to see him take his first snap in college, and that was actually an interception. And after that interception, I had no clue what he would become. I didn't know he would become a Heisman winner and one of the greatest quarterbacks in college football history. Lamar is the first quarterback I ever watched in college football that can make the wrong read on a read option play and still turn it into a gain of big yards or a touchdown. Lamar had an okay freshman season, especially considering where he was ranked, but his sophomore season is where he had everybody in awe. It seemed like every week he was just creating a new highlight, whether that was one highlight or 10. Lamar would put up stats of 3,500 passing yards and 30 touchdowns, then on the ground he would have 1,500 yards and 21 touchdowns. And of course that season was where him and Deshaun Watson had that crazy duel on a Saturday night, which Clemson ended up winning. For his college career, Lamar would have 9,000 passing yards and 69 passing touchdowns. And on the ground, he would have over 4,000 yards and 50 total touchdowns rushing. And let's be honest here, he carried those Louisville teams, especially his last 2 years. Like, his teams had Jalen Smith, Jair Alexander, CJ Avery, Des Fitzpatrick, and that's cool, but his teams weren't that talented. By the end of his collegiate career, Lamar Jackson won ACC Player of the Year twice, ACC Offensive Player of the Year twice as a one-time All-American, was a Heisman Trophy winner, and won multiple other awards. And on a side note, it's sad that we never got to actually play with Lamar Jackson in the NCAA video game. And for this video, I know I left off guys like Tim Tebow, Percy Harvin, Trayvon Boykin, Denard Robinson, and more. But if this video does good, I'll make a part 2, and I'll maybe even make it all time instead of 20 years. But that is it for this video, and until next time, I'm out. Peace.